You're listening to the Corbett Report. corbettreport.com.
This is a message to the future. A digital message in a bottle cast out on the binary waves of ones and zeros out into that digital eternity, on the other side of which I know not what lies there. I know not who is looking at this right now or listening to my voice. But if you are, I guess it means that we've lost. Those of us who are concerned about freedom. I wonder if you even know what that word means. I mean, truly means. Not what you've been taught that it means, if you've been taught anything of the sort, but what it truly means to be a free, independent human being. I don't have a digital crystal ball. I can't see into the future, and I don't know anything about your time, your place, who you are, where you come from. But the writing is on the wall for us in our day and age. And God knows there's been enough templates of the dystopian future for us to at least contemplate the broad outlines of the time that you're living in. In our day and age, the templates would be known and talked about by many, if not well understood by any. We talk of 1984, of George Orwell, or of Aldous Huxley in Brave New World, the boots stamping on the human face forever, or amusing ourselves to death with our version of Soma. But I wonder how close to the mark those visions really come. And I wonder if that's what I'm really concerned about after all. Maybe I'm biased being Canadian. Oh, maybe I should explain that. Canada, it's a region, a geographical region, but it's also a political entity in our day and age. It's a nation state. I don't know if you have those anymore. I doubt you do, but nation states are arbitrary lines on a map, but sometimes for historical or geographical reasons, partitioned off and with their own systems of government and their own ways of doing things. We call it culture. I don't know what type of global environment you're living in that future age of yours, but I can imagine that these nation states don't exist any longer. I can imagine that individual identities of all sorts have been subsumed into the great collective. So I'm not sure what you call Canada anymore. Perhaps just part of North America, or I don't know, the Western Hemisphere. Who knows what ways that you divide up your world, but in our day and age we have nation states, and I come from one called Canada. I'm sitting in one called Japan. It's an island nation off the coast of Asia. Who knows how it exists in your day and age. But in my day and age, I come from Canada. And because I'm Canadian, perhaps I'm biased by some of the Canadian dystopian fictions that I've read in my youth. From Margaret Atwood, thinking about The Handmaid's Tale or Oryx and Crake. Nightmare visions of a future society where technology has not worked to our favor, but to our detriment. And once again, if you're watching this, perhaps you know exactly what I'm talking about, even if you can't articulate it. In The Handmaid's Tale, people are, for the most part, no longer able to breed. There are only a select few who are able to actually conceive, and these few women who are still able to bear children are basically treated as cattle for humanity's sake. In order to continue the population, they must be used and impregnated by, of course, the priestly class that deigns to rule over any age, any time. They might go by different names and different garbs, but they always exist, and I presume they exist in your society, if you even know that they exist. But in that Handmaid's Tale, there's the very real problem for a society that comes to the edge of complete obliteration by its inability to breed anymore. This is already happening in our day and age. It's already becoming a reality. The anti-androgens that are polluting our environment are already starting to have their effect. There are fish species that are already becoming androgynous, and the male members of the species are dying out. And it's the same in our day and age, the same with our human male population. We're becoming less and less fertile. Sterilization is continuing apace. They're the estrogen-mimicking, anti-androgen, endocrine-disrupting chemicals that are polluting our environment. And there's every sign that it's going to continue apace. Here's the hardest part for you to believe in your day and age, is that this has been on the books for decades, literally in the books. There were books written by the descendants of Charles Darwin, Charles Darwin Galton. I can never remember because they're just one big incestuous family. He wrote a book called The Next Million Years, in which he deigned to predict the next million years of human future, because humans are humans and they won't change until they evolve, and that'll take another million years. But if it can be altered or tinkered or tampered with, if people can go in there and start changing the genome of the species, then real change can happen in much less than a million years. And that was what this Galton Darwin was lusting after. And he wrote about how they were going to use chemicals and other methods to get rid of the upstart males of the youth of his day and age and of my day and age, to make sure that they weren't going to be able to pose a sincere threat, a true threat to the power structure that exists in our society. And here's the biggest irony: not 1 in 100 in our day and age could tell you anything about that power structure, the way it functions, despite the fact that it is all out there in books like The Next Million Years and all those other books that have been written, even those books that have been disguised as fiction by people like Atwood and Huxley and Orwell. They weren't fiction. They were based on what is really happening today. Minority Report is another one that is becoming too much a very real part of our day-to-day life. Being able to predict the future with technologies and then to incarcerate people for crimes that they haven't committed. Unfortunately, that's becoming just more and more a part of our everyday mundane reality, and it might be such an absolute integral part of the fabric of your reality in your day and age that perhaps you don't even know what it means not to have the concept of pre-crime. Perhaps you don't know what it was to live in an age before the hysteria over the war on terror made everybody into a suspect. And I don't know what ruling paradigm you're living in, what the particular ruling fantasy narrative of your day and age is being used to control all of you, but whether it be the terrorist boogeyman scare or maybe a bioterror threat from some shadowy group that releases bioweapons from time to time, and no one really knows who they are or what their aim is, but they're trotted out in front of you as the people to give your 2 minutes hate to every now and then as the next bioweapon attack ravages your peoples. Or maybe it's something altogether different. Maybe the geoengineering has taken hold and the weather modification has come to the point where your entire globe is being ravaged by the types of climactic events that we could only dimly imagine in our day and age, but which have already been foretold by the fortune tellers of our day and age, the climate hysterics talking about man-made global warming. And maybe that has been the dominant paradigm that's taken over, and you, in your day and age, blame yourselves and your progeny and myself and your forefathers for what has come before and what is to come. I don't know how they've managed to do it, but I'm sure that they have managed to make everyone either the enemy or a potential enemy. And unfortunately, we already have hints in this time of what it will be like to live in that time. A time in which the technology enables the tracking, surveillance, and control of everyone in the world. Well, I'm not here to talk about your day and age, your time, or what particular dystopian nightmare you're living through. You're already far too familiar with all of that. I'm here to tell you what it was like in our time. This message in a bottle is a time capsule of a bygone age that hopefully to you seems naive, and perhaps you don't blame us for what the world has become, because none of us really knew. But I'm here to say that some of us did know, and we did know what was coming, and we did our best. We were the people bearing witness in our day and age to what was coming, and doing our best to avert whatever you're living through right now. Maybe our voices were too few. Maybe they weren't loud enough. Whatever the case may be, I feel sorry for you who for all I know, could be my progeny out in some distant future time. And it all started off so innocently, as all such things do. We're led along into the most grotesque, the most horrific nightmare futures because people believe in their innocuousness, in their greatness even. It's always sold to us as something wonderful, something sexy, something you want to be a part of. No one ever comes and sells a tyranny as a tyranny. No one comes and says, I'm going to take over the world and I'm going to rule it with an iron fist and you're all going to bow down and worship me. And they do. Of course not. The rulers of our day and age have long since learnt from the mistakes of past days and ages of kings and queens and lords living in their castles up on the hill. It's too easy, it's too identifiable. Everyone can point to that castle on the hill and say that's where the power lies. But think about in our day, there's no slavery. No one is physically forced, held down and forced to do labor for another. No one owns anyone else in the sense of outright chattel property. No. Everything is done above board and in a dry, clinical fashion. And it just seems such a natural part of the world that we're living in that who would ever think to even question it? So that a child can literally be born into a nation state as we know them, owing part of the debt of that nation state, the unfunded liabilities that have been signed onto by the will of the taxpayers in our democratic system, so that every newborn child is born into this world saddled in the debt of the debts and the fortunes that we have made them privy to, we have put onto their shoulders. We're not we, but that is the way that we have been sold this mass psychology, that we are part of this system because we live in this democratic age where we choose the rulers, so anything that the governments do must have come from us and we must be responsible for it. And thus, very few are willing to even challenge that system because it's like challenging yourself. This is part of the identity that we've been inculcated with, and that unfortunately keeps us locked into these mental prisons whereby we never even seek to challenge the power structures as they exist. But as I say, every child in this world being born into the mountains of debt that have been saddled onto them by the generations that have come before, and living in debt servitude, indentured debt servitude, with these debts that these abstract government entities have signed them onto, being collateralized, being backed up by, literally, by the promise of the future labor of these newborn babies. These tax slaves born onto the tax plantation to work in the current day and age, the digital 21st century form of slave labor. It's not slavery. You get to pick what profession you work in. Of course, the government will come along and take half of what you earn, but still, you get to pick what you do, so it's all right. It's not servitude. It's not slavery. These are the dominant paradigms of our day and age. But within this system, we can be sold on the tyranny that you, unfortunately, must be experiencing right now. But again, start off so small. It's just the littlest of things that have the greatest of consequences, isn't it? And in that future age, I wonder what you make of our little trinkets that we were given, little things to distract us, the 21st century equivalent of the Roman Colosseum, the games that will keep the populace distracted and to stop them from really ever confronting the power structure. We have these little slave devices in our pockets. They keep us connected to the grid that may or may not be woven into the very fabric of your genome, your DNA. Who knows what type of Borg monstrosity might be living in that future age of yours, jacked into the matrix through whatever brain chip or neurofrontal cortex interface may be trotted out in the future to wire you straight directly into this matrix. But we weren't wired into it. No one forced us to take these. In fact, if I had to wager on what was likely to come and what you're actually living through, I would say probably no one ever does get forced into doing this. I bet you people take it willingly. The brain chips and the other devices that will eventually wire and jack everyone straight directly into that matrix and to completely subsume whatever was left of individuality on this planet.